Hey guys, in this video we are going to be talking about reflecting on coordinate grids. So 2 points are reflections of each other if the x-axis or the y-axis forms a line of symmetry of 2 points. So kind of think about your axis as your dividing line, and then your point is going to be on the other side the same amount. So this arrow means reflect. And then sometimes you'll see the A with a little apostrophe, and that means A prime. A prime just means the new point. So after it's been reflected, that's the new point. And then A with the 2 apostrophes is called A double prime, meaning it's been reflected over twice. So this is going to be A double prime. So we're going to be reflecting over the x-axis. So I am going to highlight the x-axis, so we remember that's our line of symmetry that we're going to have and we're going to reflect over. So let's start and let's look at A. And our ordered pair for A would be -4, -3. We're down here in quadrant 3. Remember 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And if we're reflecting over the x-axis, we're going to be reflecting up into quadrant 2. So it's going to be still -4 on the x, but our y value is going to become 3. So we have A prime up here, and that ordered pair is going to be -4, +3. Okay, so then let's look at B. Our ordered pair for B is 2, 3. We're going to go over the x-axis, so it's going to come down into quadrant 4. So we're going to, again, the x value is going to stay the same, and it's going to become down in here where I wrote that. So B prime is going to be down here, and it's going to be 2, -3. For C, we have -2, 1. We're going to reflect over the x. It's going to come down to quadrant 3, and that's going to be C prime at -2, -1. And then D is at 3, -2. It's going to reflect up to quadrant 1. It's going to be D prime, and that's going to be 3, 2. So now we're going to reflect over the y-axis. I'm going to highlight our y-axis so that helps us a little bit to make sure we know which axis we're reflecting over. So for this one, A is at 3, 2. And we're going to reflect over the y, so we're going to end up, I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. So A is going to reflect over the y-axis and end up in quadrant 2 at -3, +2, and that's going to be A prime. And then B is at 3, -3. And it's going to reflect over 2. That'll be B prime. It's going to reflect over the y and be at -3, -3. C is at 0, 2. And again, it is on the y-axis, so you can't really reflect it over the y-axis. So it's going to be still C prime, still the same ordered pair, 0, 2. Now, if we were reflecting over the x, then we would end up getting a new point. But because it's reflecting over the y, it's going to end up being the same. And then D is at -2, -1. And then we're going to reflect over the y. So we're going to end up at, that's D prime, +2, -1. And then our last one, E, is at -3, 1. Reflect over the y, and it's going to end up at E prime at 3, 1. So let's go ahead and talk about a rule, Okay, so sometimes, like with distance, you may not always be given a graph, which you can always draw a little graph in your head or on your paper and kind of picture where it would be and where it would end up. That's fine. But we also want you to kind of think of a rule. So thinking back to some of the last problems, when we reflect over the x-axis, okay, the y value is going to become opposite, which means the x, when you reflect over the x is going to stay the same and the y is going to become opposite. So it's the opposite when we reflect over the y. When we reflect over the y is going to stay the same, but then the x is going to be opposite. So let's do some of these examples. So if we reflect -3, 19 over the x-axis, so remember, we said the x value would stay the same, so that's going to be -3 again. And then the opposite of 19, which would be -19. Because you can kind of do your little picture. -3, 19 would be up here, reflect over the x, and it would end up down here in quadrant 3. So it would be -3, -19. So this next one, we're reflecting over the y. So we have the y value then would stay the same. So that's -34. And then the opposite of the x would become +12. Again, you can do your little picture. You would start in quadrant 3 over the x, or over the y, would become +12, -34, end up over there. So it would be 12, 34, -34 would be your new ordered pair. Go ahead and do those next 3, and then come back and we'll check them. So for the next one, reflecting across the y, the x value is going to stay the same at 43, or the opposite at -43, and then the y value would stay the same at 23. So your new ordered pair would be -43, 23. The next one reflects over the x, so the x would stay the same, and then our y would become opposite, so -12, 2, and then again across the x, so it'd be -5, -7. So these next ones, we want to talk about reflecting over the x and then the y. So kind of take your picture. If we start in quadrant 1, going over the x and then over the y. So it's reflecting it twice. So when you reflect something twice, the x value or the y value would change first, and then the other one would change second. So you end up making both values opposite. So if we have -5, 7, and we're going over the x and the y-axis, we would start with the x value could become opposite, which would be 5, and then the y value would become opposite, which would be -7. Okay, so we have 5, -7. Okay, go ahead and try the next 3 and then come back and check it. Okay, for the next one, we have 1245, so it would become reflected over the x and the y, would be -12, -45. Across the x and the y would be +34, +89. And then the next one would become +13, +17. So make sure you take a picture and attach it to your notes and then begin your practice.